For TalkSport, Simon Jordan had a 70 million plus fortune that he managed to blow.
Failed club owner.
A risky investment taking over Crystal Palace, but why did it even go wrong? We're going to talk about everything, how he created his fortune, how he lost it.
London's leading hotels. 4.2 million. Was that the bill?
Not many people actually know the full details and the ins and outs of this story and who Simon Jordan was before he was ever on the radio.
I'm a bit of a terminator. I don't stop. I won't stop until I get to where I want.
Simon Jordan, you little no wonder you lost 100 million. Wrong business, you little sausage.
He's right, I did lose a bunch of money, but he's a bit of a Burke, isn't he? I mean, the fact of the matter is we've done nothing but champion him.
As a teenager / young adult, Jordan dabbled in the telephone business. There was one early venture called Corporate Seller Ltd, which was short-lived. But at the time, the mobile phone sector was booming, and he tried again in 1994. He co-founded the Pocket Phone Shop with his partner Andrew Briggs. They invested £15,000 each, and it rapidly grew into a national chain of 150 to 200 plus stores and became the UK's second largest independent mobile retailer. At this time, Simon Jordan was a young, fearless entrepreneur that described himself as a terminator in interviews with his interesting haircut.
I'm a bit of a terminator. I don't stop. I won't stop until I get to where I want. And unfortunately, sometimes that means that staff that work with me either get burned or churned. But I demand my pound of flesh from people. I work very hard myself, or I work very hard at that business. I was the first one in, the last one out. I led by example. I believe that if you want someone to do something, that you have to do it first and be better at it than them before you can delegate it to them to make sure to understand what result you're going to get back. So I just drove the business, and it's like Gary Player said, the harder you work, the luckier you become. And there is no great secret. It's about hard work and having sometimes a little bit of luck.
In June 2000, he actually sold the business to One to Go, later T-Mobile, for 73 to 80 million. There's different figures, and Jordan's share was obviously half of that, approximately 36.5 million. This was the foundation of his wealth, which he later built up to around 75 million through further investments and ventures. The Pocket Shop expected sales to have been in excess of 52 million in the year that he sold the company, May 2000.
Decided that computing was, at the time that I was 16, 17, was the big thing. So I went and got a degree in computer sciences. I went into the city to work for Dun & Bradstreet. I became the youngest freelance computer contractor in Europe. Didn't feel that computing was my field. Mobile phones was coming up, and decided to go and start a mobile phone business called the Pocket Phone Shop, which became Europe's fastest expanding retailer, the country's fastest expanding mobile phone retailer, and a business that built 220 shops in 5 years with no fund.
I do feel like, looking back, Simon Jordan got out of this deal at the right time, unless he was able to adapt, because phones change massively. People weren't acquiring phones a couple of years after he sold that company. They were just getting them on monthly contracts with the network providers like EE Mobile. So Simon Jordan's stores got turned into T-Mobile stores. T-Mobile ended up doing a merge with the brand Orange UK, and then Orange eventually rebranded to EE. So now EE is where it's led on to. But in the year 2000, shortly after the sale, he bought Crystal Palace FC for 10 million from a Singapore financer, Jerry Lim, who had rescued it from administration. At the age 32, he became the youngest chairman in Football League history, and a lifelong Palace fan. He was living the dream. He promised a promotion to the Premier League within 5 years and achieved it in 4.
I went into a dressing room once, well, against Grimsby at home, whilst my manager, one of the players, Andy Morrison, who played for Man City, was bending over and farting at his manager whilst he was giving him a lecture, and proceeded to give the players an absolute full tilt rendition of my anger. And it's the first time and last time I ever did it.
Around this time, he actually co-founded a car magazine as well, but sold his stake in that in 2006. Palace reached the Premier League but were relegated after one season, and the collapse of ITV Digital, which hit the lower league TV revenues, added financial pressure. Opened the club, bar and dining restaurant group, sold in 2011. It came a complex deal to acquire Selhurst Park, the freehold of the Crystal Palace Stadium. He continued investing in players, youth setup and operation.
I think 10 years at Palace, from building a youth system that threw out some top players, to getting it to punch its weight, to pretty much being almost in and around the playoffs, getting promoted to the Premier League, and doing it without support. I think I got most of it right. Not being prepared to put up with the nonsense from the agents, looking at the way I changed managers' contracts, that close. My mistake was not bringing other people's money in. That was a foolish mistake on my part.
And did you have opportunity?
Yeah, of course I did. Of course I did. But the perception of me, as is often the case in the media, is I'm very strong. And as a result of that, I'm difficult to potentially contend with. And I'm not. I'm really easy to contend. I'm very straightforward.
His fortune around this time hit its height of 75 million. But football ownership proved far more expensive than a normal business. The club required constant cash injections to compete, paying wages and meet fan expectations. He also diversified into property, film and other areas.
I realised very quickly that what I thought football was going to be for me, it wasn't. And so it became, first of all, it started off as a labour of love, and then it just became labour.
Because of the people that I'm to deal with.
Yeah, because of the industry, because of the people I had to deal with, because of the fact that I felt I could, it was going to be something more, and it wasn't. And I realised that really and truly, and this might be an ego, I think everyone that owns a football club, buys a football club, has an element of ego about it. So if you are a player and a manager, what a place to be. Chairman and owner? No. And it left me disappointed, because my father had played for that club. I'd wanted it to be successful. Quickly I realised that the scale of Crystal Palace was never going to be a massively significant football club. It might land itself in the Premier League and it might have a good time, as Steve Parish and his guys have done. But it's never going to be Liverpool. It's never going to be Man United. It's never going to be Tottenham or Arsenal. It's going to be Crystal Palace.
Now the main part of this video. How did this empire all crumble and things go wrong? At the height of his wealth, he picked up a £4.2 million hotel bill and was spending £5,000 on champagne, but things went horribly wrong, which we'll get into.
What's the most expensive bottle of champagne you've ever bought? When you're your height?
Depends what size
when
you're talking about.
Jerry
Bowen?
Funny suits.
Jerry Bowen. I used to buy Jerry Bowen's.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did, yeah. I don't know what that is, do you?
Yeah, it's a big bottle. Right. And how much did that set you back?
£5,000.
£5,000?
I tell you these things, I think, why in the hell did I tell him?
What's your experience about hotels, incidentally?
I lived in one for 10 years. I lived in one for 10 years.
I know, but you didn't pay the bill on checkout.
I did.
All right.
I did. No, I never on checkout. Paid it months and months later.
When you checked out after 10 years of living in one of London's leading hotels...
£4.2 million.
Was that the bill? 4.2 million quid?
Yes.
Did you touch the minibar in those 10 years?
3.9 of it was the minibar.
The 2008 crash. So he had Spanish property and US property, but it crashed. Millions were lost, including a specific 4 million exposure in Spain. A 4 million portfolio fell apart. He had stock market losses of around 7 million. A film investment of 2 to 3 million sunk with no return. Other deals of 2.5 million lost in another venture. Ongoing Palace funding. He later said he had to inject another 6 million in his final year alone, and the total loans to the club reached 20 to 24 million, plus 2 million more not on the book. By late 2009, there was so much cash flow problems that were emerging. Wage payments were delayed in November and December of 2009, and Jordan had been trying to sell the club for some time but found no buyers. By January 2010, Crystal Palace entered administration after a hedge fund creditor called in the debts. The club owed around 32 million in total, and Jordan was the largest creditor, 20 to 24 million in loans, and his ownership ended. He lost the original 10 million purchase price plus all the funding and loans. Jordan later quantified that the Palace losses were 35 to 47 million, an accountant's figure of 47 million, his cash figure close to 35 million. He called the administration the single worst moment of his entire life.
You know, I lost a fortune, and it did affect me. And it did affect me.
In the book.
Yeah, it did affect me, and it causes an impact. And mental health is something that people don't attach the same value to. If someone breaks their leg, they can see it. Yeah. If someone's having an issue, and I've been around people that have had a breakdown, I've been involved in anxiety situations and had panic attacks myself, and seen what it does to people. People perceive mental health as a weakness. They see that people that have wealth have no right to have that issue. Yeah.
The Sun, the Times and the Independent he gave interviews to and opened up that he had lost his £75 million fortune with at least 40 million and up to 56 million in assets of cash plus the Palace related hits. He described losing homes, cars and facing repossessions plus personal humiliation.
It's easy for like Simon Jordan to come on here and batter everyone, and most of the time what Simon Jordan says is right, but I think even little digs at me when he's on the show, and I'm thinking, come on Simon, you're like a failed club owner.
A failed club owner. A failed club owner.
Hello darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with
Come on, you can't batter me, please.
One thing I will say is Simon Jordan didn't have to risk it all again. When he sold his phone company, he could have just set up shop and been more safe with his investments. He took a massive risk with Crystal Palace, but it didn't pay off, but he had the balls to do so. He wanted to build Crystal Palace into a top team, and as we can see now, all the owners' worth is in the billions of the top clubs. It was always going to be hard to compete. The people was about to come into the market at the time that he left Crystal Palace, and even spoke about it being hard for him to go back.
I remember when I sold Pocket Phone Shop, and I had 2,000 staff and complete control over it, and everyone responded to me as the managing director and the owner. The day I sold the business, I picked the phone up, I got put on hold for 15 minutes by a receptionist. And when I got through to the department I wanted to, the director of the department told me he'd come back to me when he had some free time. I put the phone down and I realised I'd sold the business. Right. Walking back into Palace after I've sold it would be very difficult for someone like me, because the king is dead. Long live the king.
It'd be quite sad as well, I think.
Yeah, that's life. I'll watch them from afar. I'll always wish them the best.
At the time of taking over the club, he was the youngest owner and built up a net worth of 75 million. But now we see the likes of owners of Newcastle that are worth 400 billion, plus the Saudis coming involved, which he has criticised.
Everybody that's got half a brain looks at Saudi Arabia and goes, do you really want these people, with respect, a murderous regime, owning a beautiful football asset like an English football club? And really, in the cold light of day, put the money to one side. The answer should be no. But that's not the world we live in. We live in the real world. So now we're in a situation where these people do own one of our most beautiful football clubs, and we have to get on with it and understand it and make sense of it and try to find some sort of management of English football, not to lose the value of English football.
Now he doesn't just speak on club ownership, he's actually one of TalkSport's biggest assets. He began his relationship with them back in 2018, just appearing on shows casually, and ended up becoming one of their most important figures. Now, the money around his deal with TalkSport is not publicly disclosed, but people suggest he could be having a salary of £150,000 to £250,000. He provides a lot of value for that platform, so there could be bonuses involved as well. We've seen people like Eddie Hearn even bring up on TalkSport now him losing his money and him addressing it.
Like everybody else that has challenges in life.
Yeah.
No. What I did was, as the biggest creditor, because of the biggest banking crisis in the world, I took a view that I could no longer fund it anymore, put it into administration and wrote off 50 million quid. On the basis of the fact that I made 100 million quid. So get your facts right.
I apologise. You took the club into administration.
No, I didn't take it into administration. A secured creditor put it in there, and I had to take my medicine, which I've never complained about.
No, and
I've never bitched and whined about it. I've never gone
you,
about the fighters that ran off with me and I invested in them and started crying about it.
Well, you've cried about many things. No, I haven't. But also...
Never cried about anything.
But you sit there...
A lot of people have always made jokes across the years, and many people said things on TalkSport, but a lot of this was out of his hands. The 2008 financial crash affected all markets and was devastating for more people than just Simon Jordan, and he actually didn't go back to Palace for a long time until recently because of the devastation around his situation. He was once the owner and he lost it all.
Why doesn't Simon go to Palace games? We're all Palace fans. Why don't you?
Well, I'm going to go on Sunday for the first time since I left Palace. 15 years. Yeah, first time. It's a Rubicon I'm crossing, mentally and psychologically. I don't want to go in the stadium when Parish is there. I've got good reasons for it. Most people would have the same reasons if they're in my shoes. But I'm going to go to Fulham on Sunday and take my little boy to see his first ever football match and remind him of the fact that his dad used to own this club. So I'm going on Sunday to see Fulham. I'll see Palace at Fulham.
Excellent. How do you feel about that?
I'm looking forward to it. It's the first time I've seen them live in 15 years. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. So you should.
Indeed.
Something you should have done years ago.
Oh, mate, if you'd walked the walk I had, you probably wouldn't want to go anywhere near football, full stop.
Despite him saying this, it's like he still wants to fulfill that dream of taking over a club and making it work properly. Twice now, with Coventry's been linked to taking it over, and more recently it was a situation around Sheffield Wednesday where he raised 50 million, and both times he ended up backing out of the deal. Maybe he will raise other investors' money and he takes over the club. Maybe it's not off the table forever.
I put together a consortium of people, very well-heeled people, proved up with £50 million to have a look at Sheffield Wednesday. It's a club that I've always advocated for because I think it's a big club waiting to happen if it had proper management and proper ownership. The person that I was doing it with, I'm not going to name him, but it featured in the Sunday Times article. He's one of my best friends, Sheffield lad, got plenty of money. And I was very keen to do it initially. The reasons why I've decided not to go forward with it is because I don't like the idea of rewarding Chansiri by having to pay huge parts of the money that he has to get to avoid the Football League regulations of being sanctioned again. I always felt when it first came on the market it was nickable. I'm sorry that sounds like an unpleasant terminology. If you look at Sheffield Wednesday, whilst it's a much bigger club in my view than Sheffield United, its footprint digitally is smaller than Sheffield United because it hasn't been in the Premier League for 25 years. The stadium itself is falling apart, hasn't had a lick of paint in 20 years. So it's a really long task, and it's a really big task to get them back out of League One, to get them back up the pyramid and to get them going again. And for me, I owned a football club once. I'm not racing to go and do that again. It wasn't the most enjoyable of experiences.
So because of that, you've now taken a step back.